All right, ladies and gentlemen, do we have a show today? Musicians on Couches. Okay, you may not very readily know the name I'm going to say right now, Mark Weiser. But he owns a company called Shake, Rattle, and Roll. And it is a dueling piano company. And I met this gentleman in the piano bars with Carnival Cruise Lines. And we've been friends ever since. And I got to not only hang out with him with Carnival Cruise Lines, but I got to play his shows on land with his, it's not a band, man, it is a show. And he's got now franchises all over the country. In the 48 states, you can go see Shake, Rattle, and Roll. I want to let him explain more about this show to you because I tell you, his story in its own way is very inspiring because he's not just a musician. He's a musician, he's a singer, he's a comedian, he's a producer, he's a director, he's a music director, he's a promotional, whatever they call those, publicist, whatever. You know, he just does it all. And he created, I'm going to say this, and I'm going to say, I know somebody's going to send me, well, you haven't seen this, you know. He has created one of the most entertaining shows you can see, not only in New York, but in any part of the country, for a night out, you know, a not so super ridiculously expensive night out. It's not like Broadway tickets, you know, that kind of thing. But you can go and spend, it's not a cheap night, it's not a hamburger, but you can go out and with a little bit of money have a really, really good time. It's funny, it's entertaining, you are part of the show. It is called Shake, Rattle, and Roll. If you haven't seen this, you need to look it up, where they're playing in your area, where that's going on. He is in charge of, I believe he says in the interview, 150 versions of this idea all around the country. Or he calls them teams, 150 teams all around the country. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this interview, not only if you're a musician, but if you're a business owner, if you want to start a business, if you're a musician that just wants to break free of the, I play this club, I play that club, if this guy don't hire me, that, and you want to be in charge of your own fate, you need to listen to the show. So, without any further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Musicians on Couches Drinking Coffee. You know, that's a really long title. I don't know if I'm going to change it. It's a really long title. I like it. Musicians on Couches Drinking Coffee presents Shake, Rattle, and Roll CEO, performer, all of the things he does with that company, Mark Weiser. Hey Mark, how you doing?
Hey, how are you?
All right. Good to see you. Long time no see. So we'll do it official, you know, where I'll cut it up. Welcome to Musicians on Couches Drinking Coffee. Let's talk a bit about Shake, Rattle, and Roll, because that's the big thing, right? Now, I know you from, obviously, Carnival Cruise Lines. That's where we first met.
Yeah, yeah.
How long were you on Carnival? How long were you doing?
I was with Carnival for about 4.5 years through the mid 2000s, till 2009 is where I came back to land full time.
Wow, wow. I did it for about 8 years, I think, total was the total time. Yeah, long
That's
time.
a long haul to be at sea.
Yeah, and you just settled in the piano bar there, right?
Yeah, yeah, no, they brought me out of New York in the mid 2000s to do some of their Canadian runs as a fill-in, and after the first 2 week run, they asked me to start doing more Caribbean runs, which I guess is where the more party side of the bar
Right,
is,
right.
which is where I wanted to be anyway, because that's where the money is.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so
yeah.
I moved down to doing their Caribbean runs, and I'd done those for like 2 months at a time, sort of alternating between doing 2 month Caribbean runs and then back to New York to do dueling piano shows here in Times Square, and then kind of flipping back and forth. And I did that for about 4.5, almost 5 years. And then I just came home when New York started getting really, really busy.
Right, right, right. So, and people ask me all the time about doing the cruise ship life thing.
Oh, yes.
So, because it is a life all unto its own. By the
Yes.
way, and for the folks that are listening, your piano bar, because I think I was on several contracts where I did a bunch with Larry Burroughs and
Sure.
you with him a lot.
Yeah.
And so your bar was always packed, and without sounding gauche, your tip jar was always mucho filled.
When I train younger piano bar players, which is part of what we do at Shake, Rattle, and Roll, there's a strong focus on stagecraft. You have to learn the musicianship, obviously, of performing on stage, because that's just fundamental element of being a working musician. But not enough people, especially in the piano bar and in the dueling pianos arenas, focus on the stagecraft and the showmanship of the show, which translates to money in the jar. One of the things that differentiates the piano bar experience from most other music events, whether on a cruise ship or even on land, is that what we do is not a concert and it's not a show.
Right.
We are the MC of a party. That's really the best definition of it. We are the hosts of a party, and the audience are the guests at the party. And between the audience and the performer, somewhere in the middle is where the show takes place. So having those stagecraft skills of interaction and working a crowd, that's what puts the money in the jar for performers. And again, not to sound, mercenary about it, but it is a job that we're there to do.
Right.
And again, we're there to entertain, and that's, our fundamental mission is to put on an entertaining evening for the audience. But for us, it's a job. So the more successful we are at it, the more money we make.
Right.
That's something I've really focused on, is building those skills where we're not shortchanging the audience, but quite the opposite. We're giving them an even better time, and so they're rewarding us with their generosity.
Well, it's really cool. So I got lucky, and I because I know you when I lived in New York, helping my dad out for a little bit. He got the Alzheimer's stuff going on. I got to do some Shake, Rattle, and Roll stuff with you.
Yeah.
Just for the folks that are like the drummers out there, this is actually really hard work for a drummer.
Yeah.
You're a regular guy. What's his name? Andy?
Well, Andrew Potenza, who's now moved away from dueling. He sort of settled into a more relaxed style. But Andy was our main drummer for many, many years. And now our main drummer is a guy named CJ Young, who's been with us for about 2.5 years. But we now have a pretty healthy list of about a dozen drummer subs in the New York area that we work with. And as the pandemic had been winding down now, Broadway is just now, as we're taping this, just now coming back. So one of the drummers who was one of my main subs through this past summer is a phenomenal player named Clayton Craddock, who is the drummer on Broadway for Ain't Too Proud, the Temptations musical. And so I had him up until this past week.
Wow.
4 days ago is when the show went back to Broadway. So now he's back to this week. But I'll tell you, nothing is more awesome than having like a phenomenal Motown drummer. But no, to your point, it's a deceptively hard job for anyone to undertake. The difficulty for the drummer is, you don't have the burden, for lack of a better word, of being the out front guy.
Right.
So you kind of get to, you get to keep your head down and focus on the tunes. But the fact is, you as the drummer are the side man on the show, whereas the piano players are really out front.
Right.
So the drummer has no control over what songs are being picked, what sequence they're being picked in, and the show is improvisatory in its nature. So it's never the same twice, is what makes it fun, but also makes it hard, because you walk into work that night and all you know is, in the next 3 hours, we're going to play, maybe 60 songs, 50 to 60 songs. And we have no idea what 50 or 60, like it could be Snoop Dogg, Britney Spears, Whitesnake, Billy Joel, like Garth Brooks. We don't know what genre, what decade, what style. We don't know what's coming. So we, as the piano players, we get a little sneak preview because the request slips come to us, and I can forecast like the next 15 minutes of the show. And I, as part of my job, can try and build an arc so that like it's not just song like a jukebox, but part of what we're charged with is sort of building an evening, which is something else we train performers to do, is structuring the songs in a way that makes entertaining sense, emotional sense, comedic sense. The drummer has no idea.
Exactly.
Like you get to see about 2 minutes into the future, and that's about it.
And it's going, and for those who haven't seen it, it's two piano players and you as a drummer, and you're going back and forth. You've got one piano player is playing the tune while the other piano player is looking at the next one up on his iPod, and it just goes nonstop for whatever, 2.5 hours, 3 hours you are playing. And and some of the tunes, Paradise by the Dashboard Light, and some of the tunes, it's just a new top 40 tune, which you're like, I think I heard that on the radio. Right. Is that a halftime groove? Yeah, like I have no clue.
Some of us, so not me, but some of the piano players that I'm fortunate enough to work with have phenomenal ears, like perfect pitch hearing. And there have been many, many times for us where a song will come in where it's like a $50 request that we have no one on the bandstand knows. And one of the guys will have to grab a phone and jump off stage, and literally will take 3 minutes to learn as much of it as they can. And then they come back and they're like, all right, guys, here we go. 1, 2, like, hopefully, a lot of New York piano players will come with some sort of theater background, like me and most of the guys, at least in the New York market, not necessarily nationally, but here, almost all piano players have at least some footing in theater. So we'll have at least some flexibility and ability to like music direct or conduct. So if there's a drummer that looks at me like, I have no idea what's about to happen, like you're calling us on, like I can at least, give like 10 seconds of notes, like, all right, listen, it's just a disco beat. I'm going to count you in. Right. Changes, like, so that we can do the littlest bit of shorthand.
Of course, Shake, Rattle, and Roll, all the tempos are about 20 clicks faster than any radio, which is theater thing.
That's I'm probably more guilty of that than any. Just I'm naturally, and just as you can probably tell, my adrenaline level kind of kicks at a higher rate than most mortals. So like I'm just playing stuff, just naturally a little more brisk. That's just my wiring. But I mean, again, because it's not a full band show, I think there is a natural instinct to up-tempo things a few beats per minute just to make them feel more
Right.
urgent and more energized.
Show tempo. You're doing them show tempo, really, which
Yeah.
it is that idea. Where
Yeah.
and at first, like for me, coming from I do a lot of session work, and obviously on cruise ships, and I was kind of known for the quartz clock thing. It took a second to adjust to
Right.
race through this, and I'm just going to follow his tempo. Let's talk a little bit about the nuts and bolts because I'm intrigued by this because I've seen a couple of dueling piano things that are not like what you do at all. Yours, and I think the first time I played with you, or it wasn't with you, it was with one of your
one of my team members. Yeah.
Right. And it was a place I think that was a little upstate New York. It was like an hour north of you.
Yeah, we're all over the country now.
Yeah.
We do about 600 shows a year, so we're everywhere.
And I remember I had a good time, and I just had having a fun time. The bar was packed. But what intrigues me is it's a different kind of show. Other piano or dueling pianos, that it's sort of really just two piano players doing the piano bar thing, playing Billy Joel and the standard things you always hear. But yours is not. So you get off the ships, and how do you get from there to the shake, rattle and roll idea, which is it is definitely a show. It is a show.
Yeah. For me, I mean, I grew up in New York, so I come out of the New York mindset of piano bars. I mean, New York is a very unique place. We have Broadway, we have Tin Pan Alley. There's a deep musical storytelling tradition that is more than 100 years long and rich in New York. You have the vaudeville traditions that also go back 100 years. So the piano bar world of New York is steeped in its interactivity. So piano, again, as I said before, every piano bar player in New York comes with some theatrical sensibility and brings that, and it informs who we are as performers. So if you go to a piano bar in New York, there is inherently a sense of cabaret to everything we do. And for those who don't know the technical definition of what cabaret is basically like an evening of music that is structured together through storytelling, so that there is not just a jukebox of songs, but a beginning and a middle and an end. And now in a piano bar, like we said before, you don't know necessarily what songs you're going to play. So it's not scripted and it's not structured the way a play or a musical is, but we are still weaving this relationship with the audience where we are not just playing songs for them, but we're also chatting in between the songs. And for me, that's the most enjoyable part of it. If I just had to sit there and play songs like an automaton, that's not nearly as fun for me. Plus, it makes it a more personable event. The audience becomes this three-dimensional community. And through this style of piano bar show, you're taking this room of disparate strangers at the beginning of a night, and you're really weaving them together into this village. And it happens every single night for us, which is why I love it so. You're creating a theatrical-like, unique event where people are witnessing this one evening at this one place at this one time with jokes that relate only to these people because it's what's happening in real time that you're commenting on, emotional content that ties into this group of people that you couldn't replicate or duplicate, and you're using the information around you in the room. When I was trained, one of the best things I learned was, there's an element of show business that says the show must go on, right? Which is like, the theatrical idea that no matter what distracts you, no matter what's happening in the darkness of the audience, you say your lines, you hit your marks, you do the show must go on. For me and for us in the piano bar world, at least the people who do the kind of show that I do, we thrive on the opposite of that. I was taught when something happens, when there's an elephant in the room, you draw a big red circle around it. Like you use what's there, because if someone trips and drops a glass, and people are oh, what's that going to do to the show? Well, use that, You know, it's happening. If someone's saying something to you that's funny in the middle of the show, everyone is experiencing this together. So you're taking all of this information and you're improving in real time this hosted evening of entertainment. So I'm using, people are writing their requests on request slips. So that is really a pad of information. It's your name. It tells me what music you like. If you're dedicating your song to someone, there's all little kernels of information that if you pay attention, you can draw threads from all of these slips and create not just, Glenn in the dark who likes Billy Joel, but I can start to make Glenn a three-dimensional person and have everyone go, say hi to Glenn. Everyone, hi, Glenn. By the end of the night, we've learned all these people and we've created these characters or identities, and we've brought this group of people who didn't know each other 3 hours ago together in a way that's really meaningful and really touching and really unique, and that's funny and personable. So for me, that's the power and the magic and the real utility of a great piano bar show.
Are you guys all right? I'll be okay. I'm not big on social graces, but sit on down to the Oasis. Honey, I got friends where? In Oasis. Drunken second verse.
Interactivity is like the pinnacle of what it's about.
Right.
When we work with new performers and sort of train them, every element of what they do, every song they perform should have at its core some kernel of interactivity. Is the audience going to be clapping along? Are they going to be singing along? Is it a comic number? Are they laughing along? Are they going to be dancing along? There's all kinds of interaction. Even kinetic movement is interactive. So our aim is that at no point, if we're doing this right, should the audience just be sitting there passively holding a martini while we're playing a song. You can get that somewhere else. You can get that, at many other worthwhile entertainments where your role as an audience member is more passive.
Right.
That's not what we're there to do. We are there. You're choosing us because you want something, even if you don't know it, you're going to have a more active time. You're going to be singing along and engaging with us. And again, in the New York style of piano bar and dueling pianos, we're going to be talking to you like a radio show. You're going to be out there, and I'm going to be breaking through the fourth wall into the audience to chat with you. And you may not know that that's coming, but that's
right.
Piano shows.
So is the name Shake, Rattle, and Roll? Is that like your?
That's us. Yes.
That's you, right?
That's us. Yes. So, Shake, Rattle, and Roll Pianos is my company. That's our dueling piano show. But
how many teams do you have right now?
We have, in an average year from coast to coast, at this point, we employ over 150 people.
That is amazing. That is just fantastic.
We've grown to the point now we're in our 12th year, where we will do in an average year over 600 events, both public and private, so that we're not doing just a full 52-week-a-year bar schedule here in New York and in Boston and in other places, but we also do a really robust private party. We do corporate events, we do weddings, we do birthday parties and barbecues, and we've been really, really fortunate that we've gotten to do some really amazing, really interesting, unique kinds of events. We've played for presidents, we've played for A-list celebrities, we've played for Fortune 500 companies, we've played for foreign royalty. We get to do backyard barbecues for the neighbors, like every imaginable celebration, whether it's a wedding proposal for two people, which we've done a lot of. And we just booked, not for a piano player, but for we now handle guitar players too at Shake, Rattle, and Roll. We just booked a wedding proposal that's going to be a guitar player on the Brooklyn Bridge in 2 weeks, doing at sunrise marriage.
Wow.
Yeah. So we do events for 2 people. We do events for 2,000 people. You know, it's all different, but it's always interactive at its.
Are you the central location? Like if I'm in LA and I want to book Shake, Rattle, and Roll for my event, do I go to a website and talk?
Yeah, our website, which is shakerattlerollpianos.com.
And I will link to that on
Yes.
the YouTube thing. So
the shorter version, which you can also use, is SRR pianos if you want something tiny.
Okay.
So it's Shake, Rattle, Roll pianos or SRR pianos. That takes you to our site. Our regular public performance calendar is there. You can also contact us for private events. So our central hub is here in New York City, but we also run satellite teams out of the Boston area, Chicago, Columbus, Ohio, Orlando, Florida, Boise. I mean, we're everywhere. So wherever there's an event, we have teams, we have performers in all 48 states and throughout Canada now. So that wherever your event is, we have players in that region that can service it. And it all gets booked from here.
And that is just fantastic. And you started Shake, Rattle, and Roll a year after Ships or 2 years after Ships?
I started it a year after Ships. I came home. The real origin story of Shake, Rattle, and Roll was I came home from the Ships, went back to my dueling piano show that I was working at, not one I was running, but it was a venue in New York that I won't name, but they're not around anymore. They've been gone for about 10 years. But it was housed in Times Square, and it was around through the 2000s, and I was one of the entertainment directors there. And the owners, how shall I put this, were not the most reputable people. And as an example of that, one day in early 2010, the owner pulled us aside one by one, each of the performers, and said, and this is almost word for word because it's burned into my head, you know, we know you guys are making a lot of tip money here. We know you guys are going home on Saturdays with a lot of cash. So our new policy is going to be, if you want to play here on Saturdays, you're going to work on Fridays for free. We're not going to pay you a salary.
Oh, man.
Yeah. And I said, thanks. It's been fun. I've got to go. And that day was when Shake, Rattle, and Roll was born. And that was the day I decided I was done working for other people. Because there's just, again, the bar business is full of many great, decent, honest, hardworking, fun, uniquely kind people. It is
just as many of the other kinds.
Yes, it is also, unfortunately, a haven for criminality because there's a lot of alcohol and there's a lot of chemistry and there's a lot of unfortunate criminality that creeps into the bar and nightlife industries. And we could do a dissertation on why that is. But that's the unfortunate reality, is that there is an element and a segment of the bar industry that is nefarious. And so I decided in early 2010, I was done working for other people. I was going to steer my own boat. And Shake, Rattle, and Roll really was just created so that I would have enough work during the month, during the week, during the year for me. And I wouldn't have to rely on other people. And the challenge was that unlike most other urban centers in America, especially in the Midwest and in the South, where dueling pianos had come from, New York did not have a dueling pianos market. Boston did, Philadelphia did, New York didn't. And so the model for most working piano players in our industry was you were a house player in a brick and mortar venue, and you worked there 2-3 nights a week all throughout the month. So that was a good 12 nights a month of work, Thursday through Saturday, and you covered your finances. Well, we didn't have one bar to give us 12 nights of work every month. So I had to go out and find 12 bars that would give me 1 night a month of work. Right. So we had to entirely reinvent the paradigm for what dueling, and I can say in all honesty, in 2010, no one else was really working that model. That wasn't really something that was in existence in our industry to that degree. So we had to really paddle upriver And so we started ourselves. And again, my goal was just to get enough work for me to survive. And the fortunate part was it came together pretty quickly. Bars knew what the potential of the show was and knew what the power of the money draw in the cash register was. So we were quickly able to sort of cobble together, oh, this bar wants a show every week. This bar wants a show twice a month. This one wants it once a month. And as long as I got those 12 nights a month, we were covered. And very quickly, I knew that I wanted to have my own show in New York City, because to me, New York City is the center of the world. It's, you know, the crossroads of the world. And if every other city in America could support a dueling piano show, surely we could. So I brought every ounce of my experience growing up in the club scene, working in theater, like every production trick and tool and tip and technique that I had ever heard of, learned, utilized, read in a book that had never been applied to dueling pianos anywhere else before. I took all of that resource, all of those ideas, all of those skills, put it together, and decided I was going to produce my own show. I was going to stand or fall, live or die on my own name, producing, and what no one else had ever done in our industry before, really self-producing, selling our own tickets, running our front of house, running our advertising, not just bringing in the players and doing the show, but actually filling the bar myself. So we did that in a 90-seat bar in Times Square, and we were there. And right from the get-go, we gave ourselves about 3 months to the first show. We were sold out for the first show. We had been lucky enough to sell out every show since. We've moved the show about 5 times in the last 12 years to bigger and bigger rooms. This year, after the pandemic, we're now at a place called the Cutting Room, which is one of the premier live music venues in New York City. It's 300 seats. We're now there every Saturday night, and I am thrilled to say, with, you know, a little bit of P.T. Barnum aggrandizement, that our show is now the best looking, best sounding, best tasting dueling pianos experience in America. I would stack us up against any dueling show in the 50 states. As a Saturday night experience, I think our show tops everything that's out there, including Las Vegas. I think our food is better. I think our drinks are better. I think our sound is better. I think the lighting and our stage and our arena, the experience as a whole, even before you get to the quality of the show, which I'm immensely proud of. I think in its totality, I would stack our dueling piano show up against any in America, and I think we would be at the top of the rock, hands down. But that's just the producer in me.
It's something magical. See the end in my blood, it's known. We know in time, don't get me low. We got something where we get knocked down.
Yeah, it is a great show. When did you bring on your first other team, and how does the training work? Were you guys to do that?
Yeah, we started having to farm out shows to teams, I have to say, almost immediately. Within about 2 months of the company's founding, and I remember it quite vividly, was, you know, when I had booked myself for a Saturday night, and then the phone rang, and there was another bar that was asking for a show on that date that I couldn't do. Well, now I had to start working the phones to the guys I knew and be like, hey, do you guys want a job for this date? Because I can bring you. And then it just kind of organically started that we just started filling other players for shows I couldn't personally do. And it just grew and grew and grew and grew to the point now where we're now doing, on an average Friday or Saturday, 5, 6, 7 shows a night across the country. So in terms of the training process, that has always been a part of the dueling piano's ethos. The way players learn this job is very much like the artisans of the Renaissance, where there is a relationship between, and I hate these words, but they're the best way to describe it. There's sort of a master and an apprentice. So if you were a child in Italy in the Renaissance and you wanted to learn leather working or glass blowing or, armoring or any skill, your parents sent you to train with a master in the field, and they taught you for years the craft until you were skilled enough to leave the nest and go on your own. That's pretty close to how it works with us. When you're a young player, you're coming in, and again, in other parts of America, it's easier because there's a brick and mortar bar where you can go 4 nights a week and sit and watch the show and get some stage time and build your skills. In New York, there's only the Saturday night for us. So it's a lot of classroom work, where we get together in a rehearsal room and we're sort of working on skills in a classroom setting. And during the pandemic, that flipped over to really like this, to being in Zoom,
Right.
Where I'm now training players across the country in a Zoom setting where they have their keyboards and I have mine here in the studio, and we're working across a Zoom session. So it's really about, for the most part, the players who come to us are already solid piano players and they're already solid singers. And it's really about learning the repertoire, learning the catalog of songs you need, which is immense, like you said before, because you never know what's coming.
Exactly.
So you need to be as diversified vertically, horizontally in your playing catalog as possible. Thousands of songs is not enough. Like, you need to be as versatile as you can be. And then you also need to be interpersonal and funny and interactive and improvisatory, because that's the spine of what we do, especially here at Cal and Roll. So it's working with performers to really heighten and shape and utilize that part of themselves that may be suppressed, or that may be like a muscle has never really been tapped.
I want to tell this story because when I got to New York, I texted you to say, hey, I'm in New York, if you need any help, right. And you said, come on down and check out the show. And what you were playing in the basement of the Madison Square Garden at the time, right?
Yeah.
And I came down the Saturday before the election, right? And what I remember, and I consider myself a jack of all trades. And if you do what I do, you got to be, right? I'm always moving different things. And even when I was in New York, I played in a Pink Floyd tribute band. I played in a Peter Gabriel tribute band.
Yeah.
And then I did your cabaret, and I did a couple of top 40 things. So whatever, the phone rings, I go, right?
Yeah.
That's the thing.
And I mean, that's a working musician. Yeah.
Right. That's the thing how you do, right? That's how you make a living. Same with cruise ships, you're doing different things all the time. So he said, come on down, see if you'd like to do this thing. And what I remember from that show, and I got to tell the story, how you were in the moment and this was happening. And obviously that election, this was the 2016 election, right?
Yep.
And somebody asked, they gave you the $20, whatever it was, to play We Are the Champions for Hillary. If you remember this moment, Andrew was drums, and I got to talk to Andrew that night. And then you started doing it, and somebody else stood up and said, I'll give you 40 if you do it for Trump. And I think you went back and forth for a while, so you got up to like $80 or something. And I thought, okay, this is fantastic. He just made like $120 off of one tune based on the political situation at the time. And I thought,
God bless the election cycle. Yeah.
And I was, not only was it funny and the audience was cracking up, but it was two people that were like back and forth for Hillary.
Listen, I'm a huge believer in, freedom of speech and freedom of opinion. Well, as long as you put your wallet behind it, don't just stand up in the middle of my show and then just shout out, I hate this guy, I love this guy. Listen, if you want the freedom of your opinion, back it up. And so I remember that night. So those people did. So yes. And during every election cycle, as it is in every corner of our society, especially now in these particular times, people are very entrenched in their positions. And again, what I try and do is, we can't, listen, at the end of the day, I'm a court jester with a piano. It's not like I'm going to do any big hearts and minds stuff, but maybe we can get a conversation going, and maybe, on the extremes of both sides of the room, if I can show up a little bit of the silliness that is out there in all the different corners, then that helps too. That helps the conversation. So for these people who really want to commit to like bashing the other wing, okay, well, at least it's going to cost you something at our show. And if I can give the rest of the room a hearty laugh at the same time, mission accomplished, but I do remember that night. That was that was a particularly special moment.
I won't forget it. It stays whenever people ask me, or occasionally I send you a name of somebody who's interested in doing it here, or you post that you need somebody for an area. I know a guy. Sure. Just to say, I always tell them that story because it was just an amazing moment to me of not only people and where they are, but the show that you put together. And what I want to let people know is that you not only have to be a musician, but you got to be a comedian, and really you're an entrepreneur here because you put this thing together. And Shake, Rattle, and Roll, even though it's a derivative of the dueling piano thing, like I said, I've gotten yours is the first time I played drums in a dueling piano thing. I usually dueling pianos are just two guys.
Just two guys, yes.
And I think you mentioned to me one time that you like having the rhythm. It helps the people do it, right?
Absolutely.
So and I thought that was a really good addition because you've got one guy playing at least left hand to make a bass line. So it kind of works really well. And the drums definitely add a little more energy to the piano. And I got to do a bunch of shows with Greg Asadorian.
Oh yes, who is the single best dueling piano player in New England. I learned a lot of this job from Greg. Greg is like the top of the mountain.
If you wanna be my lover, you have got to be. That's the way it is. Think about that, I know how it feels. Now go and taste it. If you really fuck me, then I'll say goodbye. Now this story from AZ, my favorite, we got this.
What do you see for Shake, Rattle, and Roll 5 years down the road, international?
World domination.
There you go.
I think we have our own sort of in-house plan of continued growth, continued expansion, continued development. Within the last few years, as I'd said before, we've added a guitar division where, we're now doing, for example, Margaritaville just opened a new store here in Times Square. We provide all the guitar players for Margaritaville here in New York. We've branched out into DJs, into string quartets, into other avenues of entertainment. So, for me, I don't like sitting still. And so the only way for us to continue to grow as a company is for us to reach out into new areas. So, not only bringing shows to new geographic areas, we get approached about doing shows in the UK and outside the United States, in the Caribbean. So that's something we're looking into doing, into expanding our roster. So whatever ways we can grow and provide the next generation of entertainment ideas. I'll give you another example. The pandemic, for all of its obvious negative consequence and all of its life-halting occurrence of separating us out for 16 months, it forced us into this live stream space where we are. And so we had to adapt within a week. When our showroom in New York City closed on that Sunday, we had 7 days until our next scheduled Saturday show was supposed to be on, and all of New York was shut down. So we had to build a brand new business model in the live stream space. So we moved our Saturday night show onto the live stream where it was for 16 months every Saturday. And we were bringing in new audience members from all over the world who wouldn't have seen us or heard of us.
Right.
And also it allowed us to develop new products, which we now actually have kept running. Every Tuesday night, we do a Name That Tune game show because our brand is music. So we
Right.
take our music knowledge and we apply it to a game show where you have lyric knowledge and trivia knowledge and music knowledge. And that's every Tuesday at 8 o'clock, we do a different theme. Every Wednesday, and we're taping this now on a Wednesday, so literally in a few hours, every Wednesday night, we do a game that we created called Piano Bingo, where it's like an all-request piano bar format fused with competitive bingo. So instead of calling a bingo ball, every song we play, the year of release of that song is the ball. So if I play Piano Man, and that came out in 1973, if you have 73 on your card, you check it off. So any song is part of the game. And that way audience members can request songs like they're at the piano bar, but it also helps them check off their card. So it's a fun way of keeping
Right.
interactivity and music in a live stream game format. So we had to adapt to survive. And so that's been, you know, where we've lived for not just the last 18 months, but the last 12 years. And that's where we're going to continue to be. You know, we're always innovating. We're always looking for where can we go next.
And you know that bringing us back full circle and closing it out, that's how I kind of started this little silly show, because I was just bored and I started getting some good people. And my hopes actually by the end of this year, if not next year, not this year, but next year, is to find some sponsorship, some real sponsorship, not the
There
little
you go.
dollar Patreon stuff, but the real, maybe one of the drum companies, like, because, and I know this is a little odd, but you know, as the interviews get big, and I really enjoyed interviewing Mark Farner and you and all that, like, I would like to interview like Springsteen's drummer,
Yeah.
his experiences in the band. And the only reason I didn't do instructional stuff is because on YouTube, there's 9 kajillion instructional videos. I didn't want to get in that ocean.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and then the interview thing, there's just a few, there's not that many. There are some out there, but and I wanted to do a more light, most of them are talking about technique. I don't want to do that. I just want to talk about stuff. And I've had non-musicians who I call other people, you know, the other people would email me, say, I thought this was gonna be really dry, but like his story about Sting was Andy Bashford worked with Sting on one
Oh,
of the,
nice.
and said it reminded him when he met him for the first time, it was like looking at Zeus. And that's because he's, you know, he got the 6-pack of abs and he's such a
Yeah.
70 years old. And we talked about how Sting has a presence and not about technique and all that kind of stuff. So the idea was to have conversation with musicians that we're the same as everybody else. We have troubles, and maybe I can get a music company that's got money to so I can get bigger.
Hoping.
So I really
You're great.
doing this and having some fun with me. And if you haven't seen Shake, Rattle, and Roll, you need to, whether it's in New York or whether it's in one of the states they're in. It is literally one of the funniest and most interactive shows I got to work with. I had a great time playing it. I had a great time watching it that night of the Saturday before election. It's amazing. And I've known Mark for years. You were also very funny in the piano bar by yourself. Whatever ship it was on that we actually met for the first time. I don't know. They're all just one big ship now.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I don't know. I think about it from time to time, and it's a bright spot and a dark spot in my life at the same time.
No, it is what it is. You had to take it to tell you that it was.
All right. Thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you. This is great.
It'll take about 2 weeks for me to edit it and find some clips of you online and throw it in. And I'll link you to it when it's done.
Sounds great. Thanks, Glenn. This is great.
All right.
Cause it should. You're fine.